on the line, and if he has, it is a quite remarkable performance.
Up the hill they come. Dynast now forges his way to the front here for Tom Scudamore from Hidden Cyclone in second and driven out towards the line. It's another one for Tom Skewer and David Pipe. Dynast wins at the festival, wins the Ryanair.
They're off. Thistle Crack, great leap at the last. He heads up the run-in now. Alfred Obo in second position, but it's going to be Thistle Crack and Tom Scudamore. Tom rides him out on the run to the line and he clears away in great style. Thistle Crack has won the Ryanair World Hurdle.
Tying up the early on Rouge for the last Samurai are attacking. The early on Rouge gets through to win the Betfred Beecher Chase.
And Thistle Crack is the one who will come and claim the early lead in the hands of Tom Scudamore. It comes to it now, and again he stands almost outside the wing. He's over safely, and he is clear. The novice, Thistle Crack, is going to win the King George. Thistle Crack is the champion of Christmas.
Cloth Gap and Tom Scudamore come down towards the last fence. They've flown it. He's flown every fence in this race. Cloth Gap and Tom Scudamore then in the closing stages of the Ladbrokes Trophy are well clear. He flew round. Cloth Gap and Tom Scudamore have won. Raw Guide moves towards it. The Peter Marsh Chase is going to the top weight and favoured. He's carried 11 stone 10 to victory. A progressive horse for Venetia Williams, and it is Raw Guide and Tom Scudamore who've counted up and have won. Rock My Way is going to hold on and win here.
1,500 jumps winners under rules to add a few more on the flat, and that's that. After a quarter of a century in the saddle for my first guest this morning, Tom Scudamore. How does it feel? How does it feel a couple of days on from making the decision?
I feel very content and happy for a change. I don't feel like I've got one more winner to ride or anything like that. I'm feeling very, very content, and I've been very privileged, so I'm feeling very happy.
You say very happy and content for a change, suggesting that maybe the last few years you weren't always happy and content.
No, it was always, all through my career, it was always about trying to find the next winner. You've got David coming on later, but it was always our joke. You know, we'd go into the winners' enclosure or into the parade ring after riding a winner, and you know, the owners would be like, "Congratulations, that was fantastic," and just be like, "That was then, this is now." You know, it's not straight on to the next thing. So you know, all the way through, I was always driven by just trying to ride as many winners as possible. And at times, you don't look back and maybe appreciate the success that you've had. It's not a blur, but it just you're just so focused on trying to achieve that you don't look back and maybe take things in like you should.
And that's very intense over a very long period of time, if that's consistently your mindset.
Yeah, it is, but I was very content, and I was very comfortable where I was, but I think for plenty around me it probably wasn't quite so easy.
But for those who haven't been catching up with the news this week, just tell us why now, and why out of the blue like that.
Yeah, it's always been something in the back of my mind all the way through my career, is when is the time, be prepared for it, because the chances are you're not going to have the choice and the decision to make it. You'll either get the sack or a doctor will sit down and tell you, you've got to stop. Because of what happened to my grandfather, he had a very bad fall around Wolverhampton, and he had to retire because of that. So Dad and myself, all the way through our careers, it was always drummed into us that you have to be prepared for life after racing. So all the way through, always had ideas and things that I'd like to do, and always had different interests. So, but obviously when you get to 35 and up from there, you are on borrowed time. You're coming to the back end of your career, and you know that it's going to come. You had so many sportsmen say they know when the time is right, and I thought that's just what a load of nonsense, what a cliche. I'd had a fall at Chepstow a couple of weeks ago, had a bang on the head, was concussed. But I felt okay, no different to normal. Did all the protocols, went absolutely fine, sailed through that, came back. I had a fall and I lay there. And normally when I lie having a fall, I'm lying down thinking, why did that happen? What should I have done differently? I'm angry with myself, I'm angry with life at that point, and I just want to make it better and try and improve again. I lay there after getting a kicking and I thought, I don't ever want to do that again. And that's the first time that has ever happened. And I thought, that's it.
Was it just the pain or the inability of your body to recover?
It wasn't the pain.
Just a trigger?
Yeah, it was a trigger. And I am aware that I can't do the things I could do 6 months ago, from a physical side of things. I mean, I'm in good shape, but I am 40 years old, however much I try and lie about it. Time waits for no man, and the knocks, the recovery, it does take that little bit longer, and it does leave its scars, and that's what, although I think I could go on till I'm 50, I can't, and it's just all got too much.
Do you consider yourself lucky, in a sense, that you did have that moment of realisation?
Yes, I feel very lucky that I was able to put myself in a position where I could choose. Very few jockeys get to choose when to say thank you very much and exit the stage. Most, it's you're replaced by somebody younger, or a doctor sits you down and says, you cannot do this anymore. And I was very fortunate. Neither of those things applied to me.
It struck me this week, of course, that it's not just been 25 years for you in the limelight, because you were so visible as a child when your father was coming to the end of his career.
A precocious little something, I think some would say.
Well, my memories are very vivid of you appearing quite regularly on the BBC, particularly, and occasionally on Channel 4, before you were, old enough to ride in races when you were growing up, and your dad was one of the most famous sportsmen in the country, multiple champion jockey, retired in 93. Yeah,
I would always go racing. I'd always follow Dad around like a little shadow. And even after he retired, obviously with his association, Nigel Twiston-Davies, was always racing. And it was, it's not just a life, it's absolute passion, and everything that I've ever wanted to do has always been involved in racing. It was all I was ever going to do.
You mentioned, obviously, that you were going round after him at the races because there was only a 3 or 4 year gap between his career ending and your career starting. Did that make your grandfather Michael's influence even more sort of intense over your childhood?
Definitely, for various many reasons. I probably spent as much time with Grandad as I did with Dad. Maybe not. Maybe possibly even more time with Grandad, especially when he retired from training around 1991 and came to live next door to us, basically. So I spent the majority of my formative and times when you're developing years in the company of my grandfather, and he had a huge effect on me. And I'd like to think that's the way I try and conduct myself, and everything that I've done is basically because of the standards which my grandfather set.
Of course, most people in racing now know your dad quite well, or if they don't, they know of him quite well. Fewer people will have known your grandfather as well. What was he like? What kind of character was he?
He was an extraordinary man, and the amount of text messages and things I've had through from the last couple of days, the ones I've got most pride from are the people that Grandad had touched. So, for instance, he had an enormous effect on Fergal O'Brien. He had an enormous effect on Matt Nichols, who is assistant to Ken Bailey. Mm-hmm. All these people he saw come through the yard at Nigel's, wanting to make a career in racing, and he'd have had so much pleasure from watching what they'd achieved and how well they've done. And he was a huge part of their formative years as well. He was that sort of fellow. He loved taking people under his wing, teaching them not just how about horses, and which he knew. Crikey, what he knew about horses, it was just extraordinary. But the way you conduct yourself, the way you go about things, he was just a real man who standards set, and everybody just followed.
And how did that manifest itself for you during those first few years of your career, when you were fortunate enough to be a Scudamore, but on the other hand, You kind of had to labour under being a Scudamore.
It was never a labour. It really wasn't, and it never felt that way. I just felt so proud of what Grandad and Dad had achieved that I didn't want to let the side down. That was the only pressure I put on myself, was that I didn't want to be the one that and then there's Tom, there's Michael, Peter, and Tom did okay, sort of thing. So that was it wasn't the pressure of living up to them, trying to match their achievements or anything like that. I just wanted to be respected and be successful, and I think I've achieved both of those things. But yeah, so it was never that pressure of trying to match their achievements. It was just being able to sit down with them, look them in the eye, and be treated as equal.
And say, I didn't stuff this up.
Yeah, exactly.
As you said to me earlier in the week, I didn't drop the baton.
No, absolutely. And it's the same with, through the generations, but through how my grandfather's generation, Dad's generation, how they treated the sport and how the respect they had for the sport as well. And I think that whatever generation the mantle of racing or the baton is passed on to, you can't drop it. And the improvements that was made for jockeys during my grandfather's career, and then again through Dad's career, through on to mine, I didn't want to be part of the generation that lets what's gone on before down through different reasons.
And of course, you intersected with a lot of jockeys that had ridden with your father, and now you leave a weighing room that looks completely different. Are there any jockeys that you started with that are still there?
There are a few that are older than myself, and I think Will Kennedy and Paddy Brennan. But there's nobody. They hadn't got going when I started, so I was on my own. Dickie Johnson would have been the last one from the generation that. But, he started maybe 3 or 4 years before me, so we basically went through it all together. He'd have been the last of my generation, as it were, that I see.
How is it a different place now to what it was when you started?
Things have changed so much. Obviously, over 25 years, life has changed. On the outside, never mind the racing bubble. But the thing that's changed most recently, obviously, COVID has had an effect on this, whether it's detrimental or not, whichever way you look at it. But for instance, the segregation inside the weighing rooms now, is alien. If I walked into the weighing room now compared to 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it is an alien environment compared to how it was before, because you were suddenly kept in cubicles, and you didn't have that camaraderie and perhaps looking after each other that maybe you'd have had before, because it became so much more insular.
So everyone's in more of a little bubble now than they were.
It's gone back a little bit more to how it was, but with that segregation now, the areas of sitting down, having a cup of tea, all those things have changed. The weighing rooms have become bigger in many ways, and rightly so, probably catching up with all the other sports. You have warm-up areas. For instance, Leicester now have exercise bikes, warm-up areas, Sandown the same. I think the weighing room at Worcester looks like it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So, things like that have changed for the better. But maybe the way that everybody can relate to each other, you become a little bit more separate. Look, it is a sport where you are an individual, but before going through, everybody used to sort of look after each other a little bit more, whereas now I just feel that it's become a little bit more detached.
We spoke earlier in the week. You answered the question pretty readily yesterday on ITV. You said that Thistlecrack was by far the best horse you rode. You were unequivocal in that. When you first won a race easily on him, was it obvious to you that this was unlike any other horse you'd ridden? Yeah,
I not unlike any other horse I've ridden. I just thought he was a very good horse. I rode him first time round Aintree. It was his first run over 3 miles, and Joe Tizard said to me, "Look, just ride him to make sure he allow him to stay. I don't want to see you being the winner, jumping the second last. Just allow him to stay." And I just took my time on him a little bit. But he just was able to take me wherever I wanted to go. It was in a Grade 1 field, and suddenly I found myself cantering, turning into the straight, and it was just so straightforward and easy when it shouldn't have been. Grade 1 races are not meant to be easy. I was able to go wherever I wanted, and I'd never had I'd ridden some very nice horses before, but in a Grade 1 field like that, to literally have a schooling session, I hadn't experienced that too many times. I thought, yeah, he's a pretty good horse, and then he just got better and better from there.
And what was it like riding for that team, for Colin Tizard? Because that was a nice little association that gathered a bit of steam.
It was. We had a lot of success together. Stairs Hurdles, we won the Coral Trophy together. King George's, I think I rode probably the best part of 100 winners for the Tizard family. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Joe it still is a very close friend, and they're a wonderful family, and I feel very proud to have that association. And again, looking back, and the joy I used to get for riding for them, because it was a real family outfit. You obviously had Colin training, you had Joe there as well, but Kim was such an influential part. I remember her saying to me one day, and she was absolutely right, I went in and they had a few runners, and I spoke to my owners, and I was chatting away, and then I left to go and get on the horse, and Kim just very calmly just turned to me and said, "You've got to speak to everybody, Tom." And it was just how to conduct yourself, how to do that. I'd gone and spoke to my owners. I hadn't ignored the other set of owners, but the way she went and did it was just absolutely fantastic. And I learnt my lesson then. I was like, yeah, okay, this is part of it. If you're working for it, it's all part of everybody. And she was fantastic, and I'm very, very proud of riding them so many winners. And
there's an interesting observation you recalled there, because I'm guessing when you're in the moment and you're focusing on the job at hand, it's very easy to forget who you need to be talking to and what you need to be doing.
Yeah, I've come up here today with David. We spent another 2 hours in each other's company, and we're just talking about things. And as he said, you have 90 seconds as a jockey to really make a mark on your connections that you're riding for. Not the trainer, but you're going in to the owner when you walk into the parade ring. And those first impressions are so important. Whether they're going, that moment of whether they're going to like you or not. And it's not, you can't win on every horse. If you win, of course they're going to like you. But when you get off, give them the debrief. Are they going to believe you or not? What are your intentions, etc., etc., etc. And it makes it a lot easier, I think, if you're personable, you get a good relationship with them, and that they trust you.
So actually, do you think owners pay more attention to how you are off the horse than how you are on it?
No, it's all part of the package. You have to be, you have to obviously succeed, but you have to be bright, you have to be polite, and you have to be disciplined. You can't make it without any of those.
And of course, most of the time, 80% of the time, if not more, 84% of the time for most jockeys, you'll be going into Excuses Corner.
Absolutely. The greatest jockeys of all time lost 75% of their races. We're talking the top 0.0001%. You're going to spend an awful lot more time losing. So you have to learn from those defeats. You have to learn how to put it right, and you have to learn how we can all move on from here together, because that's what everybody's looking for, is how, we haven't won today, what have we learnt, how can we be competitive next time, because otherwise there's no point in being part of the sport.
You are remarkably clear-headed for someone who has only just retired from the saddle. Has that clarity been coming to you over the last 2 or 3 years as your seniority has increased since the retirement of McCoy and Johnson, and you found yourself as the senior man in the weighing room?
No, I think I've always been quite clear. I've always been quite opinionated, and I've always, I think because you spend so much alone in the car, you're always thinking things through. So I've always had a plan. I've always been clear in my mind of what I want to do, and I think that's probably just part of that. And you're aware.
I think that's just part of who you are. That's part of your DNA.
Definitely. But you are aware. As Harry Cobden put it so succinctly in the paper today. When someone retires, you're just aware that you're just another step closer to the door. The sport moves on. AP retired at Sandown. By the time we got to Uttoxeter the next week, we'd forgotten about him. Richard Johnson was a hero to so many people. It was his send off at Newton Abbot. I remember going to Stratford the next day. He wasn't there. You're not thinking, oh, where are they? You're thinking, right, there's probably a few more rides for me now. It doesn't stop. It's a real emotion.
Well, it brought back a lot of memories for me earlier this week when you retired, because I remember at 14 going to Ascot and your dad shocking everyone with his retirement on a horse called Sweet Duke, trained by Nigel Twiston Davis. And Peter's on the line now. Morning, Peter.
Morning, Nick. How are you?
Very, very well. I dare say Tom's announcement this week brought back a few memories for you as well. Did it surprise you that he retired as he did?
Yeah. In the manner, I was at Newcastle. Tom has always puts it so well. We're going about our business. Then he rings me and said, "Dad, I've had enough." And with Luce, and she said, "Is he really meaning that?" And I said, "Yeah, he is." So it was a shock in that manner. But as Tom's put it, we all know it's coming. Tick tock, tick tock.
How did you feel reflecting on his career? How do you feel as a father, as a mentor, as someone who was in the weighing room just a few years before he started?
The word proud comes to mind. Above all, I think, without being too emotional, and I always felt my father left me such a magnificent legacy. I'm not sure. Lucinda said that Thomas did things with a smile on his face and a bit of joy, and looked to love his racing, which I never did. So, I'm very, very pleased with all that, and the three of us. It's I think I don't know. It's just family is everything, and I think we've all looked up to what my father did, and I hope he looks down and proud of both of us, I suppose.
Tom and I were talking earlier on. You probably heard, and he said, really, I just didn't want to drop the baton. I didn't want to let you guys down. I'd imagine you could never have been let down.
No, of course he didn't, in any shape or manner. I've said it before. Riding goes on. Riding in all sport, everything develops. I think he was a better jockey than I was. Whether it was a better jockey than my father, we ride in different eras. But I always felt that I wanted to match him, and not in numbers Tom and I have spoken about it before. We all get different cards to play. Dad had 2 or 3 wonderful horses to ride, and won a Gold Cup and a Grand National and the King George. I had Martin Pipe and some fantastic trainers behind me, and Tom has had Thistlecrack and Mighty Thunder and David Pipe and his brother behind him. So he's had a different hand of cards to play and played the magnet. I think we don't leave a stone unturned. We did the best we could at the time,
And we were speaking earlier and saying that really he's been in the limelight his whole life, because he was so visible, and Brother Michael was so visible when you were in your heyday as a jockey in the late 80s and early 90s. Did it ever go through your mind what it might be like for a child of yours to then go into that environment?
Oh, I think undoubtedly when you're doing things like sports or anything, you get into the highlight. No, not that we were famous. No, not in that way. But it's a selfish thing, and it's only that you come to realise later that it's not just about you. You're piling pressure on the people around you. You are compared to your father, and if you're doing that's in any walk of life. But if you're doing it with slight media attention, the pressure is greater. I mean, but that's no hardship. I read these things. You're given great privilege, and I like to think that he's handled his privilege with great responsibility.
So, Skew, you're always very self-effacing. Tom, he's a man, your dad, who likes to deflect credit at all times. At least publicly. I don't know whether this is the case in private. When you were going around racing with him, when he was absolutely in the zone, focused, champion jockey, what was it like?
I was just in absolute awe of him. Everything he achieved, everything he's ever done. yeah, he during those days he was a man of few words, and he just let his deeds do the talking. My growing up, what I can remember is when the Sundays were fantastic. There was no racing on a Sunday, so we'd have a good Sunday lunch and we'd all be able to relax a bit. But during the week, I wouldn't see him in the morning. He'd already gone. He was already at work. I'd come back from school, and if he was back at home by that stage, all I can remember him, he'd be sat in his little room watching the replay of the day's racing with an apple and a little bit of cheese, and that was my half an hour with my father, talking, and we just talk about racing. We just talk about, at 7 years old, I'd have the gumption to tell him where he'd been going wrong that day, and he'd have the foresight, instead of arguing, to try and explain why he made those decisions he did at that moment. And we would analyse. We'd sit in his little room analysing the day's racing, and I'll never forget. It was aged 8. I remember watching Graham Bradley on SIS with Dad round Newton Abbot, and he told me that's how you ride Newton Abbot. And it just, little things just always, there was a 5-runner novice hurdle, and things like that always resonate, and that's the relationship we had, and we do have, and he's given me every opportunity, and that's all he can do.
Skew, that must mean so much to you.
Oh, obviously. Look, I'd say, in an emotional point of view or another point of view, people, everybody said, how do I feel? How do I feel? And there's two parts of me. I'm pleased he's given up on one part of it, and that but the selfish part of me, it's funny, like going racing yesterday, I didn't look at the results at Ascot with the same, I was at Haydock yesterday, I didn't look at Ascot with the same field, how's Tom got on here, and it is a bubble that you get in, and it's a bubble I'll have to get out of now. You think you're so important, somebody comes up and asks you a nice question, and you think, just hang on a minute, I'm trying to watch the race at Ascot, seeing how Tom's coming on, perhaps we'll have more time now. Just to worry how Michael's horses run, not just that, and how Tom rides,
And actually, just to tie this all together, to ride a festival winner for Scudamore must have been about as good as it got, was it? That sensation.
That was the highlight of all the races to ride. That was the highlight. Obviously, Grandad and Granny had passed away 6 months beforehand. Trained by Michael, owned by firm family friends. My grandfather, the man that owned Next Sensation, Mark Blanford, him and his family. Roy, his father, was my grandfather's best friend. Roy's wife June was just, Granny June was just absolutely marvellous, and things like that don't happen for close-knit people. To be able to be successful and have a horse together is one thing, but to have a winner at the Cheltenham Festival, I always like to think it doesn't happen to nice people, and on this occasion it did.
I hadn't noticed, but your mum clearly knew this horse was going to win because she was in the full colours, in the black and red.
She had a knack of timing, of knowing what's going to happen, and she certainly did that on that occasion. Mum is a wise counsel. She's normally right. She told me to stay at school, and she was right.
What a special moment this was for all the family. This is Next Sensation, who won the Grand Annual Chase in 2015. I'm pretty sure Peter is still on the line. Skew, I guess now we just, as well as following Michael's horses, as well as all your involvement with Lucinda's horses, we have to imagine the next Scudamore on the race card, don't we?
She's going to be the best of the lot. First one up will be Margot, who is a walking encyclopedia of racing, full stop, whether it's breeding, whether it's training, anything you need to know, she's got. And then there's 14-year-old Myrtle, who thoroughly enjoys her riding. She's very good at maths as well, so we're all hoping she's going to become an accountant. I'm sure she'll have other ideas. And then just as we get used to Margot and Myrtle, perhaps whatever their careers, there's little Ava Grace, who's 2, who is already going like hell on her rocking horse, doing everything. Her seat is impeccable for an 18-month-old child, and I'm sure that she will want to do it as well. So there's plenty of time for us all to get nervous yet.
And there's a nice thing here. Skew, I'll bring you in here as well. Is that most people, when you say to them, do you want your child to follow in your footsteps, or do you want them to go into racing? Most of them say no, don't they? That's the automatic reaction. Oh God, no! Of course I don't want them to do that. It's dangerous and it's financially perilous as well. What's so lovely is that all of you say, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, funny. I mean, I listen there, and you look at the Valenses, the Demores, the Hannons. We are so fortunate that we have the opportunity to do it. Practice makes perfect, doesn't it? If you want to lead the band, you have to practice your music for 5,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be the player at the bottom, 2,000 hours, whatever it is. So we get the opportunities. It is a wonderful, wonderful way of life. As I say, I don't think I've ever had a day's work in my life. So Thomas will have to do some work now. When you're riding, you never do. Well, my dad always used to say, my dad's father's always saying, if I had my life over again, I'd do it exactly the same, he used to say. So, it's a wonderful, wonderful way of life. And honestly, I think when riding is wonderful, but having left the riding, I think I appreciate the horse more, and to be involved with the horse all the time is, again, just fantastic.
Skew, thanks so much.
Pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Peter Scudamore. Tom Scudamore, of course, is staying. We're not letting you get away this lightly. In case you thought we'd just put you through the ringer already, yeah. There's more. David Pipe will be along very shortly here in the studio, because you needed a driver today. Or actually, who did drive?
David drove up. I imagine I'll probably have to drive back. That's normally how it worked.
Well,
watch live racing now on racingtv.com.